Hey, everybody. Nice to see everybody here for the Astrology of Crime. Hello, bot number one. Phenomenal. And hello, everyday therapist. Nice to see you. And nice to see you. Apologies for not being able to say your name. Jalza, maybe? Maybe that's it. So today, what we're going to do on the Astrology of Crime is a lot different than what we had done previously. Before, I would run the charts and the history and all of that. And a lot of people had said that, the astrology that I gave was just very in depth, and I tended to lose people. So what we're going to do tonight is focus on really bare bones with Aileen Wuornos' chart, and it'll be more interactive as well. So enjoy. Hello, Carla. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining. Regan, nice to see you. Cass Mar. So what we're going to do with this episode is we're going to talk about the history of the crimes. Then we're going to talk about Aileen's childhood. And then we're going to talk about her chart. And then we're going to, well, thank you very much. I do very much appreciate that. Thank you. So then we're going to talk about her. After we talk about her chart, we'll talk about some discussion, some philosophical discussions, because this case is very controversial. A lot of people actually see her as a victim as opposed to a criminal. So we'll talk all about that. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Florida, yes. So let's get to it. So Aileen, this is her criminality, what wound up happening in terms of her case. So between December 1989 and, December 89 and September 90, the bodies of several men were found along the highways of northern and central Florida, including Richard Mallory, Dick Humphreys, Troy Burris, David Spears, Walter Gino Antonio, Peter Seams, and Charles Carscadon. And items belonging to Mallory and Antonio were pawned near Daytona Beach, and the alias names used were traced to Wuornos through thumbprints left on the pawn shop cars. So they found her thumbprints from when she was trying to pawn the items of the men she had killed. Wuornos confessed to the murder of all 6 men, claiming that she was picked up by the men when she was working as a highway prostitute and shot them in self-defense after they attempted to sexually assault her. Wuornos was convicted of the murder of Richard Mallory after a jury trial in Volusia County and was sentenced to death. At trial, the state was allowed to introduce similar crimes, evidence about Wuornos' commission of several other murders. While on death row, it was discovered that Mallory, Wuornos' first victim, had previously served time for attempted rape. Wuornos pled no contest to the murders of the other 5 men and was sentenced to death in each case. So that's interesting right there, right? The idea that the first man that she murdered was a convicted rapist. So perhaps there is some truth. There's some truth to her claims of self-defense, at least in that very, very first case, right? The first murder. So that's interesting to look at. Additionally, you had a client who was obsessed with the movie about Aileen. Was it Monster with Charlize Theron and Christina Ricci? Because I know there was this other one earlier, and I think it was made for TV, and it featured that lady. She's Southern. She was in the TV show Empty Nest, and she was also in Biloxi Blues. She played the prostitute in Biloxi Blues. If you saw that, that's that other movie. I didn't see that, but it looks really good. So let's get further into this. Two weeks of her arrest, Wuornos' attorney, now her attorney was quite strange. He was called the singing lawyer, and people say that she was just really checked out. She was done. She was like, I want out. So she didn't really fight, right? And neither did her attorney, supposedly. So within 2 weeks of her arrest, Wuornos and her attorney had sold movie rights to her story. A lot of people cashed in on this story. Investigators in her case did likewise. The case resulted in several books and movies, and even one opera on the life of America's first female serial killer, although she wasn't the very first. She was perhaps the most well-known, but women usually don't kill people with such automatic means. Usually women, when they're the serial killers that are women, usually it's family members, and usually it's a long drawn out death, like poisoning. And if it's not poisoning, if it's more hands-on, usually it's strangling. Women like to strangle typically, as opposed to the automatic shooting, which Aileen did. Oh yeah, she's dead. She's dead. She got put to death for sure. You loved Monster? Yeah. Charlize owned that role so hard. Well, what's interesting is Charlize actually, apparently, her mother in real life killed her father in self-defense. So she had quite a context for this role. I mean, her energy in the role completely changes. And I honestly think that in watching interviews of the real Aileen Wuornos, that's easier for me to watch than Charlize Theron. Isn't that weird? Like, Charlize Theron's energy in that movie was so much more difficult for me to stomach than the actual Aileen Wuornos. So I think that's interesting. It was very well done. Definitely tough to watch, but well done nonetheless. Let's see. So Wuornos' father, this is very interesting. Oh, thank you very much, Kino. I do appreciate your super chat. You love my background. It's so sophisticated. All you need is a book, pipe, and bourbon. Sign me up. I might add a possible smoking jacket like Hugh Hefner. I love that idea. Let's do it. I'll get one. That would be great. So additionally, Wuornos' father was a piece of work. Leo Dale Pittman. He was a child molester and a sociopath who was strangled in prison in 1969. Some say that Leo Dale Pittman, Wuornos' father, was actually strangled by somebody else, but most believe that it was suicide, that he had committed suicide. In any case, Wuornos was pregnant at age 14. We're going to get further into her childhood. Shortly thereafter, she dropped out of school, left home, and took up hitchhiking and prostitution. Wuornos had a prior conviction for armed robbery in 1982. She actually did the robbery in a bikini. Isn't that interesting? She did it in a bikini. Fascinating. Additionally, Wuornos declined the traditional last meal, which could have been anything that she wanted for under $20, and instead she just had a cup of coffee. She was just given a cup of coffee. And additionally, let's talk about Aileen's childhood. Now, this doesn't look like a vicious serial killer, does it? She was a cute little girl, right? Adorable. I'm guessing that this is way before the incidents took place, which we'll talk about. Yeah, she's got a really bad childhood, a nightmare childhood. Nightmare childhood, for sure. So she was born as Aileen Carol Pittman in Rochester, Michigan, on February 29th, 1956. So she was a leap year baby. Her mother, Diane Wuornos, was 15 years old when she married Aileen's father, Leo Dale Pittman. Leo's the guy who was in jail for child sex crimes who either hung himself or was strangled by somebody else. So less than 2 years later, and 2 months before Aileen was born, Diane, Aileen's mom, filed for divorce. Aileen had an older brother, Keith, who was born in February 1955. Wuornos never met her father because he was in prison for the rape and attempted murder of a 7-year-old girl when she was born. Leo Pittman was considered to be a schizophrenic and was convicted of sex crimes against children, was in and out of prison, and hanged himself in prison in 1969. As we said, some might say that he was strangled. Most believe that he had hanged himself. In January 1960, when Aileen was almost 4 years old, Diane, her mom, abandoned her children, leaving them with their maternal grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos, who legally adopted Keith and Aileen on March 18, 1960. At age 11, Wuornos engaged in sexual activities in school, 11 years old, in exchange for cigarettes, drugs, and food. She also apparently engaged in sexual activities with her own brother. Yeah. Wuornos claimed that she was sexually assaulted and beaten as a child by her grandfather, an alcoholic. According to her accusations, before beating her, he would force her to strip out of her clothes. This is at age 11. Age 11. In 1970, at age 14, Aileen became pregnant, having been raped by a friend of her grandfather. Yeah, that's what they say. She was raped by her grandfather's friends, and some might say also her grandfather. I mean, it just boggles the mind that something like this could happen, that a man could let a friend have sex with his 14-year-old granddaughter. I mean, crazy, right? Insanity. So sad indeed. So, having been raped by a friend of her grandfather, she's pregnant at 14. She gave birth at a home for unwed mothers, and the child was placed up for adoption. For those of us who have watched the last episode of the Astrology of Crime, that's really what happened to Ted Bundy's mom, right? She was also pregnant. Some might say by her father, Ted's grandfather, although that's been refuted. But she also went to a home for unwed mothers. Yeah, very horrific, very horrific. Oh, that's interesting though. Huh. That many of your clients from the methadone clinic, they were unwed mothers and they entered a home. Is that what you mean? So the child, when she's pregnant at 14, was put up for adoption. A few months after her baby was born, Wuornos drops out of school. Agreed, Julie. It's horrific and absolutely disgusting. So about that time, when she gives the baby up for adoption and drops out of school, her grandmother died of liver failure. And Wuornos and her brother subsequently became wards of the court. When she was 15, her grandfather threw her out of the house. And that's when she began supporting herself as a prostitute and living in the woods near her old home. Oh, so your clients at the methadone clinic had sexual experiences from ages 2 and up? That is so sad. I'm sorry to hear that. Very sorry to hear that. So, yeah, let's look at Aileen's chart. We don't have a birth time, which makes sense, given her situation. They may not have recorded it down back then, or it was just a matter of there was so much chaos going on with Mercury conjunct Chiron. Maybe that is in her 12th. That would make sense, probably. But we don't have the time of birth. So ignore the rising sign, ignore the houses, the house placements. You can, what I did with this chart is I did a sunrise chart, putting the sun in the first house. That's an alternative to doing a 12 p.m. chart. One thing is with the moon did on February 29th, 1956, the moon did go into Scorpio around 5:50 p.m. that night in Rochester, Michigan. However, most likely Aileen has a Libra moon, not a Scorpio moon. So we're going to go with that, which does make sense with this chart, especially because she, if you saw the movie, she was very much devoted to her girlfriend. So it makes sense with the Libra moon to me. So the first thing that we can see, just really basic, is that she has a sun in Pisces. So keywords for Pisces, they're about service, sacrifice. They say Pisces is a martyr that can make you cry. They definitely know how to suffer and sacrifice. Compassion, mysticism. I mean, she did speak about God. She wrote to God wrote letters to Jesus while she was in prison asking for forgiveness. Empathy, intuition, sensitivity, imaginative. I think the problem with the imaginative factor with Pisces is that they can be so imaginative that it can be paranoia, right? That imagination can be used in a way that doesn't really help. Extremely creative and devotional. Aileen was very devoted to her girlfriend. She really, really loved being the breadwinner in the relationship. Richard, are you talking Richard III? Richard III was a Libra, which people think is kind of ironic since Libra is so about love and romance and ease and flow and sweetness. But Richard III also had a mother who couldn't stand him. So Libras will balance what they had experienced before, right? Because it's all about your context. If you think like, okay, the world's out to get you, the balancing, the logic of that is, well, I have to get them before they get me, right? Oh, Richard Ramirez. Yeah. Yes. Maybe we should do him. We'll do him at some point for sure. For sure. So yeah, she was a Pisces. And that sun in Pisces, it actually makes a square with Saturn. Now, a square in Pisces, or a square in astrology rather, is a 90-degree angle, and it's very, very awkward. It's usually cross purposes. It's really strained, and it requires some kind of release, right? So with the sun in Pisces square Saturn usually has to do with father or the male figure in one's life. So with the sun in Pisces square Saturn in Pisces, or typically with sun square Saturn, we saw this with Diane Downs. She had, I believe, the same aspect. Her sun in Leo squaring Saturn in Scorpio. And in Aileen's chart, her sun in Pisces squares Saturn in Sagittarius. So with this aspect, the native usually experiences a feeling that their success is being thwarted. And it is. And if this has happened before, then she's going to expect it again. So, especially in terms of trauma. So if a baby experiences trauma and is not nurtured and cared for and consoled straight away, the baby rewires its brain to prepare for the next trauma. And what winds up happening is that they're constantly in a state of very high alert. And then through law of attraction, it becomes an apparency. See, people are out to get me, because with law of attraction, what we look at, we're going to find. So if you're on high alert and you're expecting yourself to be preyed or preyed upon or whatever, you're going to attract that, right? With law of attraction. So also with sun square Saturn, the person can be overly assertive or aggressive, which is often an overreaction to the native's fears of others. So again, that really could be that trauma. Goodness knows what happened to her, right? When she was even beforehand, before she was pregnant at 14. I mean, my goodness. So we know that Aileen was overly assertive. In fact, she had gotten into so many fights at bars with men. She was extremely pugnacious, very, very ready to fight, always ready for a fight, and she was a tough cookie. She could fight pretty hard. Lack of a father created a problem. Yeah. Well, I would say though that in Aileen's case, sometimes the absence of a parent is okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think a parent can do more harm when they're actually in the home than if they were out of it, depending on the parent. I mean, her father was a convicted child sex offender, so it's probably good that he was in jail. Yes, she's very angry toward men. What word do you love, Brooklyn Way? I like your profile picture. So, yeah, it was really, really tough for her. So yeah, she did have this over assertive, aggressive thing. She was very much on the defense, very much protecting her girlfriend at the time. So we can see that with the Sun square Saturn there. Really awkward. No, it certainly didn't help. He was quite the sicko. Quite the sicko. So it looks like Aileen has her moon in Libra, which, again, this is kind of ironic, right? Pisces and Libra are the most, I mean, they're so peace-loving. And we know that she's a Pisces sun, and it looks like she has her moon in Libra. So again, you've got to look at the chart. You got to look at the chart, and you got to look at the person. You got to start with the person and then understand the chart if you can, right? So with the moon in Libra, they're usually known for their peacefulness and their charisma. But all bets are off with Aileen, right? Also, Libra is the house of partnership. So when your moon is in Libra, usually you're going to be relationship oriented, communicative, and artistic. And Aileen was very relationship oriented. And she was very devoted to Ty, I think her girlfriend's name. Maybe she saw the murders as justice against men. I think so, Bot. I think so, Bot. We're going to analyze her in a little bit, but I think so. I think so. But most important with the moon in Libra, there's an innate need to uphold justice. There's a need for balance, right? So if she had been so destroyed by so many men in her life as a child, right? And then, I mean, she's prostituting herself on highways. So chances of her actually being assaulted and having to defend herself are pretty high, right? So that does make a lot of sense that with the Libra moon that in her brain, she was balancing the situation. And that goes to your point that she saw the murder as justice against men, for sure. So with that Libra moon, if you notice, it looks like it's opposing Venus. So when the moon, which is your relationship with your mother, has a strong opposition with something that's as beautiful as Venus, there's a bit of an issue. Usually with moon opposing Venus, there's a great need for love and affection, but difficulty getting it. So there's like this hunger. There's a very, very strong need. Because the moon reflects, with Venus there, in order for her to see her beauty, she has to see it reflected in another person's eyes, right? The moon, it's going to, when we have the moon in opposition, there's a sort of a ping pong effect in which it reflects the opposing planet. So this makes her, in a lot of respects, somewhat codependent, right? Especially with the moon in Libra, right? So there's a need for her to see her beauty in other people, right? And if she doesn't see that reflected back to her, her self-esteem plummets, which obviously it had, right? You agree. She was very angry against men because she felt abandoned by her father, even though he was a bad guy. She generalized to all men, in my opinion. Thank you, the everyday therapist. Thank you. Yes, I think that's very true too, Bot, because they raped her so many times as a kid. Yeah, I mean, her trust, right? But with that moon in Libra opposing Venus, there's a lot of mommy issues there, right? The mother with the moon opposing Venus, often the native's mom resented the responsibility of motherhood. And usually she was completely overwhelmed and exhausted, right? When you have the moon opposing Venus, completely overwhelmed and exhausted. We don't know, but she did give Aileen up, so that would make sense. And being abandoned by your mom at 4 years old. I mean, at 4 years old, there's a lot of questions there, right? It's like, what did I do wrong? Why was I bad? Why was I not good enough, right? And all of this really does affect the self-esteem. Yeah. Additionally, now this is kind of nice. You would think that with Venus making a wonderful trine to Jupiter, and by virtue of Jupiter, Pluto, but again, you got to look at the chart. It can be too much of a good thing, right? Venus trine Jupiter would usually make somebody incredibly charismatic, incredibly generous, and you do see that in her relationship. Leo, because that Venus is connecting to Leo in a relationship usually marries below their social status. Leo likes to be the king, right? They want to be in charge, right? The Leo's home is their kingdom, right? So the other part of the golden rule is not just do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but the other part of the golden rule is he who has the gold rules, right? So usually Leo, a strong Leo in a chart, they like to be the breadwinner, which is the case with Aileen. She prostituted herself and totally supported her girlfriend. And her girlfriend didn't seem to have a problem with it. I mean, according to the girlfriend, she tried to get her to stop prostituting herself, but I mean, she didn't, obviously. So it's interesting. Plus, he probably expired all the murdered prostitutes in the country and property. Who did? Poor Aileen. She was abandoned by everyone who was supposed to protect her as a child. Yeah, that's such a good point, the everyday therapist, for sure. But with this aspect, you got Venus and Jupiter. Usually that's very, very positive. But again, you do have that Pluto there. And Pluto really intensifies that Jupiter. And Jupiter, intensifies whatever it's next to. And that's Pluto, which talks about the darkness, the murder, the darkness, the abuse, all of that. So with Venus and Pluto, with this trine aspect even, others may find the native's intensity either extremely attractive or really, really threatening. It depends, right? Like if you're used, some people need a very, very strong stimulus to be turned on, right? Or to find somebody attractive, right? And other people, it's very scary, right? And also, now this is really key to her psychology. With Venus and Pluto together like that, choices will be conditioned by natives' emotional responses to people and situations, even though she may justify her behavior with intellectual reasons or logic. So Pluto is about emotional trauma, right? It's about emotional trauma, right? So with Venus making even a trine to Pluto, which is usually fairly positive, it's a matter of whenever she's dealing with love or money, right? Because Venus rules both love and money, there's that trigger there. And then there's this response that is very, very, it's about being triggered, right? So whenever she, say even if, she was on the highway and she prostituted herself and she did have this altercation and she was almost killed, which does make sense with Mallory, the first victim, then that could have been also after that a trauma response, right? And again, she would justify it logically by saying this was self-defense. I had no choice, right? But that's with Pluto. Pluto can be very triggering. Everyday Therapist says, Aileen became the parent to her girlfriend to compensate for her own loss. No, that's great. The parent to her girlfriend. That is such an astute observation, the Everyday Therapist. Thank you for sharing that. I don't wish for you to stop analyzing, because I certainly don't claim to know all the answers. And I'd like tonight to be all about, getting your ideas. I think the more that we look at these cases, the more we can heal, heal the past with these global situations, but also perhaps even prevent them, right? Prevent them in the future by raising wonderful people and raising children with love, so they don't grow up to do that. Yeah, she didn't get any stability at all. Yeah. So I love that that observation. So yeah, she's going to justify her behavior with logic and reasons. And again, that's also with the Libra moon. Libra is very, very logical. So from her perspective, when being triggered and so traumatized, I have to kill him. He's going to kill me. Like, what do you expect me to do? Right? And again, because she's gone through so much trauma, her brain is rewired to prepare for that trauma. And when the brain is rewired for it, your body responds as if you're actually in danger, right? So it makes a lot of sense. She may have actually believed that these other men were going to kill her. Although one, I believe, was trying to help her, but how do we know that for sure, right? We also have in her chart a lot of moon stuff, that Uranus at 28 degrees Cancer is making a square. It looks like it, because we don't know her exact time, but it looks like she has a Libra moon. It's making a square to her moon. So Uranus square moon, this is known for giving its natives an obsessive need for constant stimulation. So Uranus square moon, they need like action. Like they get very, very fidgety. It could be, really heightened ADD, right? And they need constant stimulation. They need to be going. And I mean, obviously she got that, right? Not just prostituting herself, but running from the law, etc., right? So a lot of times people who are in traumatic situations, especially as a child, they feel only good when they're like on high alert, when we're constantly stimulated. And she does have an Aries Venus, right? Which makes sense. And also, again, remember those that Leo, right? Jupiter and Pluto both in Leo. So there is a need for that constant stimulation there as well. So with this, there's a need for constant stimulation with Uranus square the moon. And also, obviously, this is true, with Uranus square moon, the native likely experienced disruptions and sudden changes in childhood. Usually, not usually, but sometimes you'll see this in the charts of military brats. Usually that's the case, right? That constant change. And then also, Uranus square moon can cause rapid mood swings and impulsive reactions. So Aileen, in a lot of respects, like at these bars, she would, crack beer bottles over many guys' heads, right? Were they actually assaulting her, right? Probably not. Like, how often does that happen to the same person, right? So there's this impulsivity for sure. I wish learning astrology was mandatory so we could better understand each other. I do too. I think maybe in the future I don't know if it'll be mandatory, but I definitely think that they should start teaching it in high school. I think you need to start, right? Like it would help to start learning it in high school because it's so in depth. And the more you know, the more you need to learn, right? Because it goes on and on and on forever. So I'm glad you think so. So that's her chart. Excuse me. Does anybody have any questions about her chart before we get to the questions for discussion? I'd love to hear what you all have to say about this case. I'm very conflicted about it myself, and I'd love to get more clarity and see what you have to say about it. I love that idea. Let's see what it would be so great if that would happen, right? It'd be so great. I actually enjoyed my psychology classes in high school more than I did in college. Seriously, I could think because the teacher in high school, she was very well, she knew what would be able to be put into practice. Like she used to teach a lot of really great things. So yeah, if you don't have any questions about her chart, and feel free to put in any questions in about her chart or anything about her that you'd like to talk about. But oh, interesting. Okay. You're conflicted. I don't think people are born killers, they're made. I tend to agree, right? I have really a hard time believing that a child that is given a lot of love and care grows up to kill people. I just doesn't register in my mind either. Doesn't register in my mind either. So was her execution by lethal injection in 2002 justifiable? Because some argue that Wuornos deserved the death penalty for her crimes, and others question the ethics of capital punishment, and that it was a violation of human rights. So, especially if she was insane. Her final words were, "I just like to say that I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back." So, does that sound like somebody who's not mentally ill? Does that sound like somebody who is mentally sound? I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back. It sounds insane, right? So if this is what she said before she got put to death, then they put somebody to death who is mentally ill, which it looks like it to me, right? So I think that what we have to also consider is that mental illness, it can very much be environmental. Like people can drive you crazy, essentially, right? But my question to you all is, was she sane at the time of her crimes? And because there's some debate over whether or not she was mentally ill, and if she was, then she shouldn't have been sentenced to death. Whereas other people argue that she was fully aware of her actions and should be held accountable for them. So yeah. Let me know what you think about that. I feel sorry that her life was so bad from an early age. If things had been different, things could have been different. Yeah. However, a child very similar to oh, really? I'll have to check that out. Let's look at her Mercury. Let's take a look at her. We'll actually get a clean chart for you. What's up with her Mercury? So it looks like her Mercury is in Aquarius at 14, and it's close to Chiron, but a little too wide for my money. So Aquarius at 14, that's innovative thinking. Let's see. No, I mean, it makes a beautiful sextile with her North Node in Sagittarius, that Mercury, right? I mean, you could say it's afflicted, and we, with Chiron there, but also we don't know her actual rising sign. So, yeah, Mercury at 14. I don't see any harsh aspects. No, not at all. If only, the only thing I see is a really positive one with that sextile. Thank you for your question. So, no harsh aspects to Mercury. Sane by law is what you were doing is wrong. But she didn't seem that way to me. I mean, did she seem that way to you all? That she knew that it was wrong? I mean, she was very, very adamant that she had done this in self-defense. So, interesting. I feel she was insane. She never had a sense of normality, no balance. That makes sense. Yeah. It's so hard because that is what she knew growing up, not insanity to her. Yeah, very true. Well, thank you for your super chat, the Brooklyn Way. I do appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Was what was up in Florida in 1990 alignment wise? Because your dear friend was murdered by a serial killer. Oh boy, I'm sorry to hear that. She was still out there too. Oh boy, in 1990, what was going on in 1990? Do you know what month in 1990? Let me know what month in 1990, and we can see what was going on then. Okay. Oh, August 1990. Let's see here. Let's see. August 15th. And you said in Florida, Gainesville. Gainesville. Okay. So let's see here. What was going on then? Let me see if I have that here for you. Give me 1 second. Done. Let me see if I can pull this up for you so you can see it. Done. Oops. Let's see. My pleasure. Thank you, Everyday Therapist, for your super chat. Very, very generous and kind of you. I do appreciate it. Let's see. So let me show you what it looks like here for Gainesville, what was going on in Gainesville. Oops, wrong one. Let me show you. Window. Okay, so Gainesville, 1990. What was going on? Well, Neptune was fairly close to Saturn. That can definitely create confusion, especially in terms of authority or anything dealing with structures, right? 15th as well, around that time. You did have no, Neptune was making a nice, actually, sextile to Pluto. There's a nice flow of energy there with Saturn. Okay, well, you did have an opposition between Pluto and Mars during that time, right? So that can create issues for sure. We also did have a grand Earth trine over here. So usually with Earth trines, that usually stabilizes things. Also Chiron is being opposed by Saturn. So that can create issues, especially in terms of authority and power struggles in a lot of respects. There's almost like as soon as you're asserting your authority, there's a certain level of pain. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight in terms of what was going on with your friend. Obviously, if if we had more information about your friend, we'd be able to give you more for sure. So maybe we'll look at it. So let's see here. What do you all think? Oh, okay, so this is a good point. If she thought it was justified, why not call the police? Yeah, well, I would think that if she thought it was justified, she probably doesn't trust the police, right? And also, one of her Johns was a police officer. So there's a lot to unpack here. Did she try to cover it up? Yes, she did. Well, I mean, not very well. I mean, the thing is that's so interesting about Aileen, she's not a good criminal at all. Like when they found the belongings of these victims, I mean, she left a wealth of evidence, right? She was not a good criminal at all. And also another thing about Aileen that's really interesting is that a lot of serial killers, they're devoid of complete emotion. not Aileen. She was highly emotional girl, right? Really, really emotional. So she did, to a certain extent, try to cover it up, but not very well. She wasn't very good at that. She and Danny Harold Rawlings were both roaming free at the same time. Whole state was on lockdown. August. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I see. I think the opposition between Chiron and Saturn, I think that's where there may have been issues for sure. And also with that grand trine, there could have been a certain feeling of being locked in to something because Earth stabilizes. And if you're in a stabilized situation that is not good, that could create a problem, right? Most serial killers are actually Earth signs, I believe they say. Yes, she knew. I think she gave up on physical life towards the end and wanted more spirituality, especially saying her last words. Yeah. Yeah, she wanted out. And most Pisces, like, you got to remember, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. They have been around the block and they're just sometimes done. They're just done, right? And they incorporate all of the other signs. Like Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. Without Pisces, the whole zodiac would fall apart. And we underestimate them, right? But they incorporate all of the previous signs. And, a lot of times, because Pisces does at times pertain to endings, it is also associated with either drug addiction, alcoholism, suicide, right? It's all about how we undo ourselves in a lot of respects. Of course, there are some Pisces that put their energy toward artistic stuff, right? Being of service, losing themselves in service for sure. Oh, thanks again, Everyday Therapist. I do appreciate that. Additionally, let's see. I'm sorry about that. Maybe we'll look. Did they find the perpetrator? Did they find the perpetrator? Thank you, Everyday Therapist. Oh, I see. Okay. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. So I have a few other questions I'd love to throw by you. Yeah, she said I'll be back. So she sounds like she's not in reality, right? So another question would be, was her execution justifiable? Like, should she have gotten the death penalty if she was insane? Like, should there be capital punishment? I guess number one. And two, if the person's criminally insane, should they still be put to death? So, oh, wow. So your friend's perpetrator was put down. Oh, hopefully that brought the victims and you solace. You wouldn't have, oh, I see. You wouldn't have executed her. Okay. Makes sense. My pleasure, Brooklyn Way. Thanks for your super chat. No, the state should not kill people in any circumstances, Carlin. Like hard stop. No, that's just not allowed. Is that what you're saying? It would have been enough. Yeah, I mean, that was my idea, especially in this case. You'd think there would have been enough mitigating factors to not execute her for sure. And you, Regan, are also against capital punishment. However, for me, not in any circumstance. You don't want in any circumstance. All right, I see those caps. That means it's 100%. You don't kill people. Too much room for error. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Yeah. And you feel the same way. Really, really interesting. Really interesting. Well, so Brooklyn Way, like, do you feel that, your friend was murdered. You didn't feel the Brooklyn Way like, oh, good, I'm glad this bastard's dead? I'm just curious because I think that it's very easy for us to say I'm against capital punishment, but if somebody that we love is killed, I would think you want them dead. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just curious because you have, unfortunately, an experience like that. So, but yeah, did it not change for you with your friend being involved in this crime? Because I think it's only normal to want to anybody who killed somebody that you love, I think that she should not have been executed because she was very emotionally distressed by her life. I'm inclined to agree. But again, she also wanted to die. So, I mean, she didn't, and her lawyer, oh my God, what a clown. He didn't do anything to really prevent it. She was sane for trial. Usually the insanity plea goes into effect before the trial starts for lack of understanding of what's happening. Thank you, Kasmar. She was sane for trial? I mean, how you mean she pled? She didn't plead insanity? Is that what you mean? Because I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't know, but it would seem to me as if she was insane throughout these killings, throughout the trial, etc. And I had just come out of a 10-day silent retreat when I got the call he was dead. Oh, geez. I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that. Too much room for error also turns the wheel karmically. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an easy out, is my feeling. The death penalty. I mean, that's very easy. Like, why not rot, right? It doesn't seem like it's a punishment. It's like, if you're willing to, like, kill someone, you obviously don't value your life much, right? I would think. So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem like it's harsh enough, quite frankly. So this is interesting. Thank you, Kasmar. I'm not sure. We're talking about the death penalty. If my children were hurt, I would want death for the perpetrator. Yep. I wonder if in some respects they do it. They do that. They do have the death penalty because they're afraid that the victims of these, the families of these victims would take matters into their own hands. I wonder if that's the case. But I think that's understandable, Kasmar. I think that's understandable. Maybe we are moving from the view of an eye for an eye. Yeah, well, I think it was, was it Gandhi? Who was it who said an eye for an eye will leave the whole world blind? Right? I agree, Julie. Life in prison would be way worse than death. Death is too easy. Oh, I see. Okay, thank you, the Brooklyn Way. Okay, so the Brooklyn Way, for those that didn't know, her friend was actually, unfortunately, murdered. And we were talking about the death penalty and whether it's ever justified. And her friend's assailant did get the death penalty by lethal injection. And I asked the Brooklyn Way, who said she was against the death penalty, does it change with her, her friend's perpetrator? And she says, I was very conflicted due to my spiritual beliefs and my vows. Yeah, I imagine it's really, really, really tough. Yeah. Oh, you would have been fine for him to rot in jail. Okay. Oh my goodness. Everybody profited off of her story. The police profited off of it. I mean, it was a mess. Really, really, really sad. Oh, okay. Thank you. I get it, but sane for trial means you knew what you did was wrong when you did it. Well, she really thought that she said that it was self-defense. So let's see. I joke to bust out the wood chipper for pedos, but end of day, I support it. I'm advocating to kill another human being and so collect the karma. I see what you mean. I get what you mean. I think that's normal. These people, especially people who hurt children. I mean, you want them to suffer because it's just so incredibly unfair and awful. Yes, I think so. Yeah. Maybe sometimes having a remorseful perpetrator sitting in jail may be more painful than death. Yeah, I agree. I agree for sure. So did she receive a fair trial? I don't know if anybody is more familiar with this case than me that has studied it, but someone criticized the legal system's handling of her case, arguing that she was not adequately represented by her attorneys and that the media circus surrounding her trial prejudiced the jury. Others argue that Wuornos received a fair trial and that her guilt was beyond a reasonable doubt. So let me know what you think. MLT, let's see. Did Charles... Funny you should ask about Mr. Manson. We're going to be handling Mr. Manson next week. He did not... let's see. Manson and his family were arrested, then promptly tried and sentenced to death. So he did get sentenced to death. However, their sentences were commuted to life in prison when California outlawed the death penalty. So we wound up dying in prison. Yeah. Here's what happened. Okay, her last murder was November 1990. Thank you, The Brooklyn Way. Here's what happened. Law enforcement all over the damn state of Florida was stumped because her murders were over a period of time. Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, I see. So, yeah, did she receive a fair trial? I mean, she hired this singing lawyer who let her plead no contest when he could have fought for her. I mean, he could have made at least a case that that it was self-defense, and he didn't. So, hello, Sorsha. Yes, please mount that like button, people. I do appreciate that. Nice to see you, Sorsha. I'm not sure about the Unabomber. I'm not sure. I'll have to check and get back to you on that for sure. You read a great book about Manson and how everything was botched. Will you amplify on that, The Everyday Therapist? Because I think we're going to be covering Manson next week. Isn't that exciting? There's a lot to go over. A lot to go over with the Charles Manson case, that's for sure. We should talk about that next week. How many states have the death penalty? How many states have the... let's see. Penalty. Let's see. Oh my goodness. Listen to this. I'm shocked. I thought it was just Florida. In the United States, capital punishment is a legal penalty throughout the country at the federal level in 27 states. There's also a legal penalty for some military offenses. I hadn't a clue. Okay. Capital punishment has been abolished in 23 states and in the federal capital, D.C. So very interesting. 27. I'm shocked. I had no idea. So let's see here. Oh, wow. That was a rough summer, 1990. I mean, a lot of stuff went on in 1990 for sure. So you don't think she had a fair trial? She wouldn't have been executed. Carlin agrees. Oh, the Unabomber. Okay, he just died in prison. Yes, Kasmar, that's what we found out for sure. Additionally, another good question is, was Aileen Wuornos a victim of circumstances, or was she a cold-blooded killer? Some argue that her troubled childhood, traumatic experiences, and mental health contributed to her criminal behavior. I certainly think so. And she should be seen as a victim of society rather than a ruthless murderer. Others argue that she made a series of deliberate choices that led her down a path of violence, and that she was fully responsible for her crime. Let's see. Circumstances, you say that okay, she was a victim of circumstances. Victim, Kasmar, victim. So what do you all think about the men that she killed? Do you think that it was self-defense? Or do you think that it wasn't? I mean, the first one very well could have been, right? Most people believe that Mallory, the first guy that she killed, who was a convicted rapist, that, was self-defense. So most women don't kill unless it's circumstance. Interesting, bot. Circumstances and trauma. Yes, I like that addition for sure. Trauma therapist. The everyday therapist says her background led to it. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think they probably got rough with her and it scared her because of her past. So she was triggered, right? And again, remember, we saw that Venus-Pluto aspect, highly triggerable, and also that Uranian aspect. She's definitely a loose cannon in some ways. Oh, interesting. I think they wanted something more than she was willing to give. That could really be. Oh, I did not know this. That's interesting. She had self-defense training in her young years as a minor? Huh. So this is an interesting question. I know that you think that she's a victim of circumstances, but do you think that Wuornos should be considered a feminist icon? Some argue that Wuornos, as a woman who fought back against men who had abused her, represents a feminist icon who challenged gender norms and patriarchal power structures. Oh boy. Others argue that celebrating a serial killer as a feminist icon is misguided and ignores the harm she caused to her victims and their family. I like this thought, the Brooklyn way. The first murder triggered her, catapulted her into a type of psychosis. Like she sees a John and then bugs out because remember, she spared a victim who was kind to her. Yeah, I think that's very, very possible. I mean, one sudden move, right? But you kind of like her. So you think, would you go so far to say that she's a feminist icon? I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. Feminist icon. You're going to have to say no to that. I'm going to have to agree with you the Brooklyn way. I would say, if she had some help, she could have had a lot of, the thing is that at a certain point, she met this guy, right? She met this guy who's like much older than her. I think he was 69 years old. And this was her out. She married rich. There was this guy who was like president of a yacht club or whatever. And she married really, really, really well. She was a societal name. They were in the newspaper and everything. So she married this guy. But again, what's interesting is that, the marriage lasted, I think, 9 weeks because she kept hitting him. She hit him with his cane. And the older man that she was with, he filed a restraining order against her. And I believe they got a divorce or an annulment. I'm not sure. So she did have an out, but again, it's sort of like, one of the things they say is if you want to know your character defects, get into a relationship, right? So I think that she may have been triggered by this guy, right? So she did have an out. It would have been nice if she got, therapy, stuff like that. Yeah, I don't think that she was a feminist icon. Yes. If those men actually did try to rape her, then yeah, she can be a feminist icon. Okay, fair enough. Therapist says a feminist icon is a bit of a stretch, so no. Yes, I agree. She could have gone after men in a different way to fight back against men, change laws, fight for justice. Very true. Justice for other young children, right? Very, very, very true. Just like with our Diane Downs case, we saw her write an essay about child abuse and how if you abuse your children, then your grandchildren will be abused. So oftentimes they do try to go the right way, right? But yeah, with that Libra moon, she could have fought for justice. It would have been nice. So what do you think? This might be somewhat obvious. The emotional wound of the past that couldn't be reconciled against her current circumstances. There were so many wounds, right? Which one, if any of them that you know about, couldn't be reconciled against her current circumstances? Because what winds up happening is if you have an emotional problem, if you don't heal that emotional problem, you seek out a physical solution. Right. And trying to find a physical solution to an emotional problem is an issue. Right. Often that results in criminality. And if it doesn't result in criminality for the rest of us that aren't criminals, it could be also not that great. Right. So for instance, say you have something that's really, really bothering you. You might be like, I need a drink or I need a cupcake. Right. That too is seeking out a physical solution to an emotional problem. And in Aileen's case, she really, really did, right? She went too far with that. And her emotional problems were so great that the physical resolution of that was murder, right? Killing them. So she fought for justice in the wrong way. I agree. Oh, you don't get the question. Okay, so the question is, what happened to Aileen that couldn't be reconciled, or that she couldn't? What happened to Aileen that didn't allow her to feel right in her current circumstances? Right? Like what was it that irked Aileen? What was it that she was trying to change? What was it that plagued her, that really hurt her? If that makes more sense. I mean, there's so many things, right? Physically and mentally, abandonment, right? Her mother abandoning her, her loss of innocence, self-worth. Yeah, I mean, not to mention, she also she was forced to give up her baby for adoption, right? At 14 years old. And you say repeat abuse and people letting her down probably ruined her trust for sure. Instability. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. And another question that I think is really interesting, but this is sort of like the point of the show, I think, in a lot of respects. Obviously, we want to understand astrology better through the lens of criminals, but I think that it's important to study true crime because it can really help heal not only the crime of the past, but prevent crime in the future. So my other question is, how does her dilemma, Aileen's dilemma, fit in a universal context? So like, how does her story relate to humanity? Because whatever Aileen wanted to escape will, they say, reflect humanity's wound, right? So what wound does humanity have that was reflected back to us by Aileen? So whenever we have these cases that grip the country and we're like, whoa, what happened? That's really echoing humanity and humanity's wound, right? So they wake us up, these cases. So do you think that there's any humanitarian or wound in the world that is global or universal that is reflective of Aileen's dilemma? I think the fact that she was sexually preyed upon from a childhood would get triggered in the moment and blame shift into a body count. Yes, I agree. So are you suggesting it's violence, that the dilemma of violence, or Aileen's violent dilemma, or dilemma that pertains to violence, that reflects humanity's wound? That could be very well. I think that one thing that we might want to consider in terms of how Aileen's case reflects humanity's wound is, children are really completely at the mercy of their caretakers, right? And there's, different levels, right? Like there's, some parents that are brutal to their children, and some parents just are not very good, right? They might ignore their children, etc. I think that might be a wound that we learned about through Aileen. Anybody else have any other ideas? We need to protect everyone and be willing to think about how life affects others, no matter what place they are at the current time. We need to protect everyone. I love that. And be willing to think about how life affects others, no matter whatever place they are in the current time. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really true. Family abuse, really key, because I think that familial abuse is way more common than we believe, that we know, right? I think there's a few things, right? A child could go through something with a family member and it could be repressed or suppressed, right? And they don't even know, right? But yet it still affects their behavior, right? So that could very well be. Anybody else think, can you think of anything else that might reflect her wound in humanity, or how Eileen's case reflects global pain or global trauma. I love this. Knowing how to move beyond the pain to be able to reclaim agency. What beautifully said, the Brooklyn Way. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really, really, really key. Yep. Family abuse, who is protecting her, children's services. Maybe in some ways, parents should be vetted. I mean, you need to have a license to have a gun. You need a license to drive a car. You need to be 25 to rent a car, right? But anybody can have children. And it sometimes does not turn out very well at all. That's the difference between those kids that are taught by respectful parents, respect for weapons and respect for weapons laws like gun laws versus those kids that aren't taught respect. Interesting. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And finally, do you think Wuornos should be remembered as a victim of a killer? Some argue that she should be remembered as a victim of abuse and exploitation, while others believe that she should be remembered as a cold-blooded killer who took the lives of 7 innocent men. So, what do you think? When you think of her, do you think of her as a victim? Do you think of her as killer? Or do you think of her as both? You have so many clients that could have gone down her path or something very similar, and it makes me so sad. Well, I'm glad that they didn't go down their path. It's great that you're there to provide therapy for them. And you think she's a victim and a killer. Yes, I am inclined to agree. But mainly thinks of her as a victim. Anyone else? Anyone else? You think of her as a victim or a killer? So if you have anything more to say, I'd love to hear it. You can put it in the comments for sure, and I'll be replying to those because, this is sort of evergreen content, right? Because this is a case that we could talk about for hours. Oh, interesting. I would remove the word cold-blooded, but she's a victim who resulted in being a killer. Good to know. And she is more of a victim considering her childhood. I don't think the killings were done in cold blood. Really interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate you all showing up live, especially. But if you're watching this later, thanks for watching as well. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this really fascinating case. Next week, we'll be dealing with Charles Manson, most likely. So stay tuned for that. And again, thank you all for joining me, especially for the super chats. It was really nice for those of you who did that. Thank you very much. Both victim and disrespectful criminals in society and killer from disrespectful criminals since she was a child. Yeah, that makes sense. My pleasure, bot. My pleasure, Sorsha. My pleasure, Regan. Awesome. All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful night, and I'll see you soon, okay? Enjoy. Thank you all. Bye-bye.